So we want to talk a little bit about reversing lifestyle-related diseases, but how do you actually do this? We have learned that you can do something about these diseases, but how can you motivate people? How do you actually accomplish that? So let me show you a video clip here.
What will your last 10 years look like? Will you be quick enough for a game of tag with your grandchild? Strong enough to embrace every moment? Will you grow old with vitality? Or get old with disease? It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future at makehealthlast.ca.
And what's the conclusion? Let me ask you, what did you get from this 1-minute clip?
That how you behave and what you do is probably going to determine your last years of life.
Very good. Any other ideas?
Your choices matter.
Your choices matter. You know what I got out of this? Don't be a Canadian. But you know, we are all Canadians, aren't we? Maybe even worse off, because we exported that lifestyle to Canada, as we do globally. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how do you really motivate people? How do you get people to make lifestyle changes? It involves education, it involves motivation, inspiration, and also it has to do with self-understanding and goal clarification. That 1-minute clip, that's about goals. What do you want to do? You want to be around? You want to see the grandkids growing up? You want to see the grandkids, maybe you getting married? What are your goals? You want to be healthy? Do you want to be vital? Or have you given up on life? And so we can become what we want to become, but we have to dream first about, we have to have a visual image of what we want to be like in the next 5 years. And you're going to be exactly the same person that you are right now, unless you meet people that change your lives, or books that you read, or maybe this presentation group of lectures today might stimulate you to turn the corner. And you can. You can. Before I, however, go into some of the details, I want you to be really aware that if you want to be healthy, you have to become clear that it is up to you. You are the chairman of the board of health. It's not modern medicine that's determining your health, it's what you do for yourself. Now let me just mention to you, this is, I realize fully, I'm in the university city myself, in Southern California, in the medical school. I'm here in front of the overwhelming presence of the Mayo Clinic. The magnificence of medicine is exemplified here at Mayo Clinic. Some of our students went to Mayo Clinic, very fortunate, they finished their cardiology residence, and now they are the big wigs in the university there, because they had good training in the technology, in the techniques, even in the latest diagnostic procedures. And that's the magnificence of modern medicine. We can do things we would have never dreamed of even 20 years ago. We can engineer viruses, we can look into the genetic world, we can do diagnosing that never has been done before. The wonders are everywhere. But with all the magnificence of modern medicine, with all the magnificence of high-tech medicine, the modern diseases are increasing and are not being handled very well by high-tech medical care. we're very limited in modern medicine, what we can do with our modern killer disease. As a matter of fact, 86% of our medical dollars in this country is spent on treating the symptoms of disease without turning the disease off. So once you have diagnosed a person with one of these chronic diseases, and chronic means it hangs around, you have a patient for the rest of that person's life until they die. You haven't turned the disease off. It's a great economic model for the pharmaceutical industry. It's a great medical model for the medical institutions. But the country can no longer sustain this kind of a wasteful approach to these killer diseases that can be modified by what you and I are doing together. That involves education, motivation, inspiration, and self-understanding, goal clarification. And that's why we have a 40-hour educational program to help people to develop a larger picture of what health really is. It has a big focal point on the primacy of a simple diet. When you do this, it is such an amazing thing that you hardly want to believe it. I mean, we begin to understand more and more now that the body is in a default position always. The body always wants to heal itself. The body drives itself in wanting to heal itself. That's what it's designed to do. But you cannot drive a Ferrari sports car that wants to have high octane fuel and you put diesel fuel in it. It doesn't work very well, it gums up. That's exactly what's happening with regard to medical care.
Modern medicine, you know, people are totally, a system is totally involved with one goal, to keep the floor dry. We're passing about color-coded expensive umbrellas. What's wrong with the picture? We don't need more medical people, we need a plumber. Yeah. Are you with me? We need to take care of the causes of this problem. And that's what we're really doing, because most of the diseases that we have today are lifestyle related. They relate to what we do to ourselves.
Let me give you some ideas. In spite of the finest medical system in the world, in 1960, 1 in 20 women would become developing cancer, breast cancer. Today it's 1 in 7. You have the best medical system. It doesn't mean that you can turn the disease off or prevent the development of the disease. You have the finest medical care system. Look what happened to diabetes. We used to have diabetes at a rate of 5 to 10%, and in 1985 something happened. In the last 30 years, we have seen an increase in diabetes by 400%. This is not genetics. This is something happened in the environment. Somebody must have put something into the water. Somehow, something is not quite right. You can have the finest system in the world, medically speaking, and you don't do anything about the obesity. As a matter of fact, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And we're doing all kinds of interesting, we're doing surgeries and we make people gutless wonders. And all they would have to do is show people how to use the fork and spoon differently. That's all you have to do. It's just so simple, it lacks credibility. Except the library is filled with the scientific evidence that this is the approach that we need to do. But there's no money in it. And so in this country, 80% of our deaths are related to heart disease and stroke. 25% are related to cancer. And then you look at heart disease. And what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to help you to become educated and motivated to make lifestyle changes. So I'm going to explain that to you a little bit more. Here you see the coronary arteries of the heart. The heart muscle is about the size of a fist. You have these 2 major coronary arteries that branch off, so sometimes we talk about 3-vessel disease. And what's wrong with this heart is that oftentimes nothing wrong with the heart muscle itself. That heart muscle will go
50 years, 70 years, 90 years, 110 years, what is the critical factor is that these vessels begin to clog up. It's a cross-section of a coronary artery. It's supposed to be wide open from here all the way to there. But here you only see about a 35% opening left. What happened? This belongs to a 47-year-old trucker. You know what truckers eat and live? So he died, this is the autopsy here, and he was running a pretty high risk for a blood clot sealing off this coronary artery, and he would have been probably at a very high risk for an impeding heart attack anyway. That's heart disease.
So to speak. I was working on the anesthesia service, learning how to put people to sleep. And I was seeing my patients for the next day's surgery for coronary artery bypass surgery in order to bypass clogged arteries in their heart. Because it was late at night, I drew the man's blood test, and when I took the blood to the laboratory and had it processed, I couldn't believe my eyes. Now normally, this liquid layer floating on top of the blood clot is quite transparent. It's yellow, but quite clear. You can see right through it. The blood in this patient's tube, however, was anything but clear. The serum floating on his clot was thick and greasy white. It looked like glue. In fact, it stuck to the sides of the blood tube when I shook the tube. I went back to the patient. I said, Mr. Phillips, did you eat before you came to the hospital tonight? He said, yes. I said, what did you have? He said, I had a cheeseburger and a milkshake. And when he said that, I realized that what I was looking at in his tube was all the fat in the beef burger, all the butter fat in the cheese, and the butter fat in the ice cream and in the milkshake. And all this fat had oozed out into his blood and actually turned his blood fatty. Well, 30, 40, 50 years of keeping your blood very fatty creates changes in blood vessels that are very dangerous.
Over the years, arteries can become clogged with fatty material. Then a blood clot can form, blocking the blood flow completely. If the artery leads to the heart, the lack of oxygen can cause heart muscle to die. That's a heart attack. If the clogged artery leads to the brain, the patient has a stroke.
The next morning, we took Mr. Phillips to the operating room, and I put him to sleep, and the surgeon opened up his chest. And from these arteries, he began pulling out yellow, greasy deposits of fatty material called atherosclerosis.
What you saw here is called narrowing and hardening of the arteries. This is what is on the inside of the artery, just like you see here. This is a buildup of fatty material that becomes as stiff as a stone because of the calcium that stiffens it. These are fats, cholesterol, and calcium, and it stiffens the artery. The artery is supposed to open up every time you have a blood flow going through. It's supposed to be as like a rubber band. It becomes as stiff as a board, so your blood pressure goes up to push the blood through. And what you saw is an inner sheath, a lining on the inside that you see here again, that they're pulling out. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the main underlying disease process for most of our circulation-related diseases. You want to take this very seriously. This is called atherosclerosis that relates to an inflammation of the arteries on the inside. Let me go one step further. And now you may understand why most people don't wear out, they rest out. Now let me ask you, how many miles of blood vessels do you think the human body has? How about 60,000 miles?
Wow. I was right.
Two and a half times around the world. 60,000 miles. And most of the vessels are 1/10 the thickness of your hair. They're called capillaries. We are wonderfully and fearfully made. We're the ultimate in design. We're top-notch, first class, and yet many people settle for second-class foods to put into a first-class body. We need to have more reverence for our body. Now, we talked about coronary arteries that become narrow, they become stiffened because of a disease called atherosclerosis, heart of the arteries. Please note, this disease is not only afflicting the coronary arteries here, but it's affecting all the major arteries in the body. So you have the arteries to the brain, the cerebral arteries, they're becoming affected, and it impedes and compromises memory function. It's the main cause of strokes. It's directly related in many ways to hearing acuity. It's related to optical diminishment, visual troubles, macular degeneration, because in this case, the small arteries in the back of your eye are being affected by this atherosclerotic process. Then you come down into the heart, you come down the kidney arteries, then you come down to the femoral arteries, you come down, you talked about, Dr. Harvard talked about neuropathies. By the way, there's no medication that you can take for neuropathy that really turns this disease off or even makes it livable. But you can do it with a diet in just a few weeks. There are many reports published now. And the answer is that you have a very excellent chance that you might be able to diminish dramatically or maybe even eliminate the neuropathy that you have in diabetics. But also, one of the arteries I left out here is called the penile arteries. Penile arteries are about 1/6 the size of a coronary artery. So they're relatively small. So they can begin to get clogged up. And when that happens, there is no longer the option available to have optimal blood flow. And when you need optimal blood flow at a very strategic moment, some things go south. And there's great embarrassment. And there's great consternation. Happens in 45, 50-year-old men. Folks, this is not an absence of Viagra. This is a circulatory problem where you have the buildup of cholesterol and fats and calcium inside these small arteries. When we tell these people, you can actually reverse this disease process, you have to do something about your smoking, that also causes narrowing of arteries, you have to do something about your diet, you can raise the flag again. Maybe. It's a canary in the coal mine. It's oftentimes the first sign that the circulatory system is beginning to narrow down, clogging up. Oftentimes affecting the penile artery first. So what you see, these are many diseases in different sites. They have many different names, and every organ is being treated by a specialist. The heart is taken care of by the cardiologist, the eye is taken care of by the ophthalmologist, then you have a specialist for the ear, you have a specialist for the heart, you have a specialist for the foot, right? You have a special... And everyone prescribes the very best medications that they know of for the particular organ that they take care of. In the process, some people take 25 pills a day. And there's no discussion anymore, oftentimes, among these different specialists, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is one major disease. This is one disease. You take care of atherosclerosis, you take care of most of these diminished functions in the different organs. This is the difference between allopathic medicine and lifestyle medicine. Because in allopathic medicine, you have particular drugs that are very, very specific. If you take blood pressure medication, what do? They lower the blood pressure. That's it. When you have diabetes, you take a medication and it's very specific for lowering the blood sugar, right? When it comes to diet, diet affects all of these systems. And that's what is so surprising. You take care of one, you take care of all, just about. This is a new discovery that we have made in the last 15, 20 years. Because we thought our program was actually called the Coronary Health Improvement Program, because we said, we'll take care of the heart. And then we began to realize, you help people see their ophthalmologist, they see the optician, and all of a sudden they say, you have to get new glasses. We have to give you weaker glasses. What are you doing? I mean, you can improve your eyesight. We're learning all these things. I mean, these are sort of emerging now more and more and more. Diabetes diminishes. Diabetes is manageable now. It goes away. Heartburn. Used to have heartburn. 2 weeks later, it's gone. How could this be? You have psoriasis. We have no good medication for psoriasis. Eczema. In 3-4 months, it's gone. You see, this is the magic when you have a lifestyle medicine approach that is holistically being utilized. But when I say holistic, I spell it with a W-H-O-L. Whole. The whole body becomes affected. The diet doesn't just help the eye. It doesn't just help the ear. It doesn't just help. I had one man come in to me and he said, I'm very disappointed about the CHIP program. I mean, I was shocked. I was a guest speaker in Carolina, and he puts me down like this. And he said, I was very disappointed because when I came to the CHIP program, I looked at some of the films that you have made, and I noticed that you had a lot of hair. And he said, you noticed, I don't have any hair. And I thought, maybe if I go to the CHIP program, my hair will grow back. But it didn't do it. So there's one thing that we haven't quite succeeded yet with. So these are then diseases that are characterized by fatty deposits in the artery that are not natural and that are not a necessary component of aging. If you live a very simple lifestyle, you don't have to get these narrowing processes to any extent. As a matter of fact, you can reverse them, as Dr. Harmon showed you today. Dr. Esselstyn's work at the Cleveland Clinic. Narrowed down, got a blood flow, angina pain. All of a sudden, at 2.5 years later, the artery is fully functional again. No medication, no surgeries. And in order to help people to adapt to their lifestyle, we thought you have to first teach the people why they should change. Because if you don't understand the reason why you should change, why do you want to change? But we can tell you, if you make these and these and these changes, if you understand how the body works, and you can expect a great likelihood that you will be able to reverse these disease processes, you can arrest them, you can certainly improve them. And the scientific data is coming out every year stronger and stronger. And you see, these are the drivers of atherosclerosis. The higher the risk factors on this arch, the more powerful it is in driving these diseases. So if I ask you, what are the 3 major drivers of atherosclerosis and the related disease, what would you say? Just read it for me. What are the 3 big ones? Cholesterol, high blood pressure, and smoking. Yes, these are the 3 big ones. Everybody should know that cholesterol is as important as your driver's license when it comes to health issues. And the cholesterol should always be 100 plus your age. So if you're 35 years of age, what should it be? When I go to China, to the provinces, I take cholesterol numbers there. People have cholesterol levels of 90, 100, 110, 120, 130. When they have 140, they start shaking. Oh, we're going to have a heart attack like the Americans do. I said, we don't even have these low numbers in America. Everybody is happy if they have a normal cholesterol of 200, right? Folks, let me tell you, when I went to school, we considered 300 to be normal. Now we think it's 200. Internationally speaking, an ideal cholesterol is 100 plus your age. If you have a normal cholesterol in America, you normally die from heart disease. Don't be normal. Be ideal. Have the normal numbers that you have in countries where you don't have this disease. Doesn't that make sense? That should be our normal numbers. Yeah. So, just to give you some example, if you have this is a very high cholesterol now, this is a very high cholesterol, this is a high blood pressure, smoking, diabetes. This person is 35 years of age. Anybody here 35 years of age? Male? Close to 35 years of age? Male? Anybody? How about you? Travis? I'm 46. Oh, you're 46. You look so young. Okay, let's say you're 35 years of age, and the chances of a heart attack in 6 years is 140 times more likely to happen with this profile in comparison to this. Huh. Did you get that one? 140 times. We can bring cholesterol levels down 50, 20% in just 4 weeks. You gave some examples this morning. People dropping their cholesterol by 80 points. 80 over 240, that's about a third, 35% drop in cholesterol in 30 days, in 9 weeks, in 12 weeks. And when you bring your cholesterol down with diet, it reshapes the heart, it protects the heart, it helps the heart to begin to reverse its disease process. When you do it with medication, it brings the cholesterol down, but it doesn't protect the heart. It just gives you good numbers. Except, if you had a heart attack and you take those statin drugs, they can be actually helpful to you. They are, after you had a heart attack. But you don't really protect your heart from a heart attack if you haven't had one yet with these drugs. The studies are very clear. It takes 100 men to take these drugs for 5 years to save one heart attack. One heart attack in 100 men for a 5-year period cost $500,000 for the drugs. Folks, you can do it with a diet, and you can easily reduce the likelihood of if you reduce your cholesterol by 25%, you reduce your heart attack risk by 50%, and you can do it in 30 days. You can cut your risk of a coronary in half in 30 days if you bring your cholesterol down, like in this example, by 25%. And that's what we do with the CHIP program. We help people to bring their cholesterol down, we help them to bring their blood pressure down, we help them to reduce their salt intake. Most Americans take 10 times more salt than the body really needs. When you're overweight, you're increasing your risk for high blood pressure, and with that, for stroke and heart disease. Smoking, we already know we can do something about this. Diabetes, we can turn diabetes on and off. You heard Dr. Barnard talk this morning. He has done probably more research than anybody else. I hope you understood this morning that you are sitting at the feet of one of the master teachers in American medicine today, Dr. Mark Barnard. I'm just one of his disciples. I'm just a peon. He has shown over and over again, as we have done in some measure too, that you can turn the disease off and you can turn it on. It all depends on the amount of fat in the diet and perhaps the sugar too, and the amount of fiber in the diet. And please note, once you understand this, that triglycerides, these blood fats, the obesity, the diabetes, even the smoking, the cholesterol, and the blood pressure, they're all related to our, what do they have in common? Lips. Lips. And we can actually perhaps add stress to this as well, because with our lips we create a lot of stress in other people. Our lips get us into a lot of trouble. Kindness, spirituality, serving others. To live is to give. Stress management has to do with who's in charge. Life is going to make you better or bitter. It all has to do one little difference, the letter I. If you believe the world has to turn all around you, you're going to be angry, you can never get what you want, and you're going to be miserable, you're going to be living a bitter life. You'll be stressed, but if you take life in a different manner, and you say, how can I fit in? What can I do to help someone else? And all of a sudden, you begin to realize that happiness can never be chased. No. Happiness just comes to you as you are a kind person. And so we try to teach this in our program. We know that about 70 to 80, 90% of all these diseases like stroke, cancer, heart disease, and diabetes are totally preventable. About 80% of chronic disease and premature death in the United States could be prevented by making significant changes in diet and lifestyle. This is Time Magazine coming up with this. This is based on science. Here's the U.S. Health and Human Services. This goes back to 2004. Even then, they said our nation's largest killer disease are largely lifestyle related. Our use of tobacco, lack of exercise, and our rich diet is causing these diseases. This is what we need to do. You have a bypass, the surgeon has done a great job, and then you go home, you keep on smoking, you keep on eating the rich foods, and nobody told you, by the way, you need to be on a really strict diet. And the dietitian comes and says, well, maybe you should be on the American Heart Association diet. You know, cut back a little here, do a little bit there. But folks, that's not going to do it. You're being set up for the next bypass. Tell us about this. You got 2 minutes.
You just told me the story. How many heart attacks have you had?
I've had 4.
You had 4 heart attacks?
I've had 4 heart attacks, and
Bypass surgery?
yes, and a double bypass surgery, 4 stents.
And they told you all about the change that you have to make, right?
Correct.
Like
Yeah,
what?
I do the American Heart Association diet, do the American Diabetes diet, and I followed them really, really close, just as close as anybody could do, and I still wound up with it. And then I was also, about 10 years ago, when Dr. Esseltyn wrote his book, and I took that into the doctor and the dietitians, and they both said, no, 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 do not follow that, you will kill yourself. So I didn't follow it. I thought, my gosh, they were adamant about not following the whole food, plant-based diet. And then Dr. Esseltyn, he absolutely says, no oil, no oil, no seeds, no nuts, you know, if you've had it,
So very good. So you see, there was some information given, but it was very inadequate,
Very.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
4 heart attacks. And now she's waking up and she says, there must be a better way. She reads the book by Dr. Esseltyn and she says, that's what we need to do. She gives it to her physician and says, dietitian, no, it's dangerous. Folks, this is the science. There's a gentleman here that I talked to earlier. Tell me what happened in your situation. 2 minutes.
2, 3 minutes? All right, well, number one, my name is Joe, and I went through the CHIP class last fall. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Last July I had calf pain, I had a deep vein thrombosis, blood clots in my lungs. I'm age 50. And so that was kind of a rude awakening. I have a family history of heart disease. My dad died when he was 57, 11 blockages, 5 bypasses, and a valve replacement did not come out of the surgery. All my uncles, brother, cousins, all have heart disease. So I went through the follow-up at Mayo, through the anticoagulation clinic, thrombophilia, vascular specialist, the whole works. Kind of a blessing in disguise. Becky here cold called me out of the blue, says, hey, there's a class. Yeah, we're friends, but saying, hey, there's a class offered, and you know, I'd kind of like to go through it with someone I know. And so I did the intro session, looked it over. You know, meanwhile I'm doctoring at Mayo and trying to figure things out. She also borrowed me the book by Dr. Esseltyn. I started reading it, and a couple things stood out. One is that we're all marching toward the cliff. And modern medicine swoons in at the last moment to rescue us by offering a procedure, you know, a stent, you know, treating the symptoms and not the underlying cause, you know, the magic pill. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to make a right turn and not approach the cliff. You want to change things up front and avoid falling off the cliff to begin with. So, anyway, just moving forward here. So I borrowed the book, started reading that, and one of the other things in there, it said if you can get your cholesterol down below 150, you're not going to have a coronary artery disease that even if you smoked, had a genetic predisposition to heart disease, and you were obese, if you get your blood cholesterol down below 150, that's not going to be a factor. So anyway, I signed up for the class. Great class. I mean, you can talk to me afterwards about everything in the class. I would highly recommend it to anybody. But I guess just wrote down, he approached me earlier about doing this. Anybody can do it. I own 7 grills and 2 smokers, and I don't eat meat. Okay? So it can be done, and the food is phenomenal. And in the end, my blood pressure is now 115/76. I will tell you, during the very first CHIP class that I was at, the vascular specialist called me, right in the middle of it. And he said, we got the results from your CT scan of the heart, and you're only 50, but you've got more arterial plaque buildup than we'd like to see in a 50-year-old man, and your blood cholesterol is only 191. I said, all right, how about he said, I want to put you on statins immediately. I said, how about we play this a different way? Give me 3 months, I'll drop 25 pounds, and I'll get my blood cholesterol down. And he agreed. He says, that's a great plan. And so here I am, I'm 35 pounds lighter. Blood pressure is 115/76. And healthier, happier, mental clarity, the whole works. So it does work.
Thank you very much. So even the Surgeon General came out and said, nothing is more important once you make adjustments for smoking and alcohol abuse, what we eat. So diet is the primacy factor. And here, I want to really re-emphasize again what I tried to do this morning, and that is we have seen a dietary shift in the last 20, 30 years, since 1980, well, 30-some years, from whole foods to processed industrialized products. We've seen a second shift from plant food to animal products. These are the 2 major changes that have taken place. This is the American diet. Do you find fruits? Do you find vegetables? Yeah. You have 3 grapes, okay. Do you find some whole grains? Do you find some oats there? Do you find some legumes, some lentils? Do you find some beans? Do you find maybe a few nuts? Maybe a few avocados? It's basically pre-packaged food. It's food that has nutrition label. If you want to be healthy, here's my suggestion. It takes 20 seconds to tell you what you need to do. Number 1, try to stay away from foods that have nutrition labels. Number 2, try to stay away from foods that have warning labels. When you go to the meat counter and you buy a chicken, does it say there, be careful, salmonella, and so on? Folks, you want to kind of cut back on those foods, you want to cut back on those foods. The further you go, the more healthy you become. Do what you think is doable in your social environment that you're in. This is what we eat. Only 14% of our calories comes from fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. This should be more like 70 or 80%. So if I would ask you, what do you think would be a good diet composition? What would you say? Fruits? Vegetables? Whole grains? And legumes? Yeah, and a few nuts and maybe some avocado. This is refined processed food. The red and yellow is animal products. This is the American diet. Now I'll take you to the blue zone. This is where the longest living people in America live. This happens to be Loma Linda. Okay, this is our medical center there. And the Adventist Health study showed that those people, as I told you earlier, that about 10% of them are vegan, 30% of them are lacto-vegetarians. That means they don't eat meat, but they eat dairy and eggs. Then you have vegetarians that are eating some fish, and then most of the people there, about 30%, are omnivores, or they're using a carnivorous diet. And here's the weight issue. That's what I showed you earlier today, in the morning, just to refresh your mind. Adventist women, meat eaters, were usually 40 pounds more than those in the green category, and men 30 pounds. At the same time, diabetes. Diabetes is 4 times more common in the meat eaters than in the vegetarians. This is based on following 100,000 people for 7 years and then counting what disease they would develop. This is science. This is what is being discussed at large medical conventions. And wow. How about high blood pressure? These are meat-eating Adventists. They have about 90% of these people on medications for high blood pressure. Here's only 5%, and I'm even surprised at that much. That's a differential of 4 times. So if you want to do something about your blood pressure, what would be a good color to choose?
Green.
If you want to do something about your diabetes, what would be a good color to choose? Yeah. If you want to lower your cholesterol, what would be a good color to choose? Green, isn't it? Here's one of the latest studies that came out about a year ago. This is a large scientific study, a large paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and I hope you folks can see that on that chart there. I kind of have a hard time shutting back and forth. Please note, they say about 48% of all of our heart disease, circulation-related diseases, and diabetes could be avoided. Mortality from these diseases could be avoided if people did the following. Please take note. This is a scientific article. This is not some kind of a vegetarian fanatic that is writing some article. This is based on the best data that we have today. And this huge report says, increase fruits how many times? They recommend we should have 300 grams of fruit a day. That's about a half a pound of fruit every day. Fruits. Increase the number of vegetables and legumes by 2.5 plus times. Get almost a pound of vegetables and legumes, beans a day. These are recommendations from the scientific community. Then there's an increase in nuts and seeds, because most of us virtually don't eat very many nuts. And so we should have sort of a balance, a small handful, maybe 1 ounce a day would be a good idea, especially if they're unsalted nuts. And some seeds, that would include hemp seeds, or that could include avocado, these kind of things. And then number 4, they recommend, listen to this, increase whole grains by 6 times. The emphasis on whole. White rice, brown rice, barley, not white flour pizza crusts. It's not cakes and pies. That's refined grains. We're talking about whole grains. We should have about 125 grams a day. Have beans and have vegetables, whole grains on your plate every day. Whole grains. Think of what can I have on the center of my plate when I have my evening meal. What grain should I put on there? Quinoa, brown rice, right? How about some potatoes maybe? Then they say, at the same time, we need to decrease the consumption of red meat by 3 times. We shouldn't have more than 3 ounces a week. Do you know how much an ounce is? A 3 ounce meat something? That's like a deck of cards. That's all. 3 ounces a week. You divide this by 7 times, might as well hang it up. It's not worth it. I always tell people, put the meat at the edge of your plate, not in the center, at the edge, and if it falls off, that's even better for you. And then you look at processed meats. What are processed meats? Sausages, hot dogs, processed meats, they say 0 because they're carcinogenic. Just like smoking causes heart disease and lung cancer, every second person that smokes becomes a lung cancer victim. So they say, so when you eat these processed meats, and they tell you exactly how much, it will directly lead to colon cancer. There's a strong cause and effect relationship there. How about sugary beverages? 0. That also includes fruit juices. Eat the fruit. Don't just drink the fruit juices. I mean, if you want to have some on summer, it's not a big issue. You know, when I'm flying, I have some orange juice on the plane, I don't really worry about it. But ideally, eat the fruit as it comes to us in nature. It's always safer. And then, how about sodium? Cut the sodium in half, the salt. So the point is, once people understand this, once you educate people, once they understand the why they should do this, they're much more willing to do it. But you see, when you come into medical practice and you have 15 minutes time, and half of it is spent in entering the data into the computer, so you have 7-8 minutes for the patient, right? I mean, it's dehumanizing to the doctor and to the patient. there's not very much you can tell that person in just those few minutes. So you are picked up, you're being diagnosed with high blood pressure, and the physician says, okay, I'll give you some medication, because I can't give you a long a sermon here about what you need to do, but just be sure you cut back on your salt. So you come home, and you're a man, you come home to your wife and say, oh, the doctor said I should not use any more salt. Okay, so you decide as a husband and wife team, we ban the salt shaker. Is that a good idea? Is that a complete idea? No. Because 80% of the salt doesn't come from the salt shaker. It comes from restaurant eating, and it comes from processed food. That's where when you buy a can of beans, it's a salt mine. Don't buy canned beans. Put them in a crock pot as dry beans and cook them overnight. It's much cheaper, and you don't have to worry about all the salt. But you see, to really help people understand this, you need to have 30, 40 hours. And you have to have a support group so you can feel, I'm not the only one that's doing this crazy thing. Right? And you need to say, well, how did you get your husband to do this? My husband doesn't want to do this. And you begin to gain strength, and you learn from one another. In an office where you have 8 minutes time with the physician, what are you going to do there? See, that's why we need to have a new concept. And we know that we can change heart disease. This is a study that was published in 1990. This is already 10, 20, almost 30-year-old study. And physicians, when I asked my medical students, did anybody cover that in your lectures? No. Diehl Ornish is a well-known, respected scientist. He's probably going to get the Nobel Prize one of these days. And he found that when he put people on a very simple diet, which is very, very low in fat, and is plant-based vegetarian, he found that within 1 year, in patients that had serious heart disease, 82% of these plaques had begun to shrink down. And then he compared this with another group. This is one of these randomized clinical trials, and he found that those on the American Heart Association, which allows you quite a bit more fat and more cholesterol, 53% had a progression of these atherosclerotic plaques. So if you want to reverse heart disease, you've got to do it right. You've got to move in that direction here. This is what people like Dr. Esselstyn have published in the book, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. This is what Dr. Ornish has published in 1990 in a book, Reversing Heart Disease, 900 pages. It's all there. This is what you find in my books. This is what Dr. Barnett has in his books. This is not something that is just here and there. No, this is becoming more and more mainstream. There's Dr. Ornish, Newsweek cover. People can open their blocked arteries without drugs and surgery, but you have to go through a rigorous lifestyle program. There's Dr. Esselstyn right here. He took 18 people, The Walking Dead, given 6 months to live, maybe 12 months to live. They came to him and said, look, we want to live. We do anything you tell us to do. If he would have told them eat straw, they would have eaten straw. But he was a nice man. He didn't say that. He said, I want you to eat very, very simple foods. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Anything that comes to us as it is in nature. He was very, very radical about this idea of oils and sugars and salt. People did. These were the Walking Dead. 20 years later, almost all of them are still alive. 2 had passed away. 20 years later, no heart attacks, no strokes, no circulatory disease, and the arteries had begun to open up, as Dr. Harmon showed you earlier today. This is one of the corner arteries. There's very little blood flowing through here because of the narrowing. Restored 2.5 years later. No medication, no surgery.
What kind of diet?
Well, Mason, the short answer is I went on essentially a plant-based diet. I live on beans, legumes, vegetables, fruit, no dairy, and it changed my whole metabolism, and I lost 24 pounds, and I got back to basically what I weighed in high school. But I did it for a different reason. I mean, I wanted to lose a little weight, but I didn't dream this would happen. I did it because after I had this stent put in, I realized that even though it happens quite often that after you have bypass it, you lose the veins because they're thinner and weaker than arteries. The truth is that it clogged up, which means that the cholesterol was still causing buildup in my vein that was part of my bypass. And thank God I could take the stents. I don't want it to happen again. So I did all this research, and I saw that 82% of the people since 1986 who have gone on a plant-based, no dairy, no meat of any kind, no chicken, turkey. If you can do it, 82% of the people who've done that have begun to heal themselves. Their arterial blockage cleans up. The calcium deposit around their heart breaks up. This movement has been led by a doctor named Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic, Diehl in California. The doctors Campbell, father and son, who wrote the China study, and a handful of others. But we now have 25 years of evidence. And so I thought, well, since I need to lose a little weight for Chelsea's wedding, I'll become part of this experiment. I'll see if I can be one of those that can have a self-clearing mechanism.
Now, our president was not known to be a paragon of purity. I'm talking about diet now. I mean, he would have his bodyguards running every morning with him to the nearest fast food outlet. Clinton, for the last 5 years, has been a total vegetarian.
Wonderful.
And the Vegetarian Society wants to honor him and ask him to become their patron, but they're all praying that he may not fall off the wagon because everybody will know about it. But you know, the point that I want to make here is, you know, we need to have a new cow.
Yeah.
I'll call it a steer, whatever you want to call it. But we need to have a new approach to diet. And we are not so concerned just about the idea of meat, animal products or not. We're concerned about two things: processed foods and animal products. You can be a very sick vegan if you eat all the junk foods that are out there. Are you with me there? So we need to be having a balance between cutting back on those foods and cutting back on those foods here too. And use this, if you want to use them more like a condiment. If you want to have some special treat once in a while, that chocolate looks so good, that truffles, you know, enjoy it. Just have one. Just make sure it doesn't bring back all the old memories, and then you're pigging out again, right? So you need to know yourself. So once we can understand that these are the foods that bring health, they're much more willing to make the changes. And people say, well, you know, I'm not really ready for this yet. I love these kind of foods here, the processed foods, the eggs and the dairy and the meats, and I like my alcohol and my coffee. You know, I'm not really ready for making the big journey. Okay, don't make the jump, but begin to get on the journey. You see, this is a dynamic process. It's not all yes or all no. It's not this binary, yes or no, dark or bright. No, there is a lot of gray here. But if you have a heart disease, if you have a heart attack like this lady there, and you know, then you better jump from here to here as much and as fast as you can. If you're being diagnosed with diabetes, don't say, well, I'm going to make some small changes. No, you have to go from here to here. And then the results will come very rapidly. Within 3 days, your physician will have to reduce his insulin if you're in type 2 diabetic on insulin. Within days. And you can check it every day because you take your blood 3 times a day as a diabetic, aren't you? Or at least 2 times a day. You will see the results immediately. So I want to sort of leave this idea with you that changing the food we eat is the single most powerful lifestyle change that we can make to heal ourselves. Well, we talked about the why. Why should I change? Because they're predictable outcomes that are giving you health recovery. Did you get that idea? We can reverse many of these common Western diseases, especially those circulatory diseases, from the top all the way down to the toes. Remember? And then you say, well, I really don't know how to do it. And that's why we have to learn something about how to do it. It's not just the will, but we also have to engage the skill. Well, how do you make a good breakfast? Well, McNuggets is out. You're going to learn how to cook a 7-grain cereal. We show you how to use it in a crock pot. Put it in at night, in the morning it's done. It's easy. has some nice fruits with that. And we show you these kind of things, how to do it, because most people today are, I don't know how to say that, well, they're almost illiterate when it comes to nutrition and how to prepare food from scratch. Not even more homemade courses. People just shove it into a microwave and that's it. So we have to train people, we have to help them. And so we have learned over the years, we have done this since 1988 when we started the Lifestyle Medicine Institute, which has now become sort of a new specialty in medicine. We have learned the power of the group. Support. You don't want to do this by yourself. If you have a social unit, if you have a husband, if you have a wife, if you have kids, do it as a social unit. Don't break up the family over food. I don't want you to come to me and say, well, I'm doing really well, I slimmed down, but my husband and I, we had a divorce over this crazy dietary program. Folks, you want to be the kindest person on earth. Because when you tackle people's dietary preferences, that's a very slippery slope. You have to be very loving. And you don't tell all your friends and loved ones what you have learned here today. You don't. Because when you do, and if you do it, you have no friends left because she has gone bonkers. Because people are not ready. They have to be ready for it. You have to find the educational teaching moment. They say, have you considered, here's a book. Here's a video. There's a special program coming up called Forks Over Knives, a powerful film. Can I invite you to come with me? Be wise. In the CHIP program, we always tell our patients, our participants, 85,000, be kind, be loving, wait for the right moment.